The Russians, about once a week now, seem to launch either a big attack across the whole of Ukraine or an attack on Kyiv. And the attack last night on Kyiv was one of these moments where they used lots of drones, Shahed 136 drones, to cause as much damage as they could. It doesn't look as if it succeeded very well because the Shahed 136s are relatively easy to shoot down, but as they can be launched in bulk, if only a few of them get through, they do the damage. And these are the sort of debris that they leave lying around. The issue for the Ukrainians is not so much the Shaheds, they can deal with those, but the prospect now that the Russians are going to get from the Ukrainians the Fatah 110 ballistic missile and the Zolfaga ballistic missile. These are ballistic missiles with ranges of 200 and 400 miles. Now, that would be a big plus for the Russians. As a result of that, the Americans look as if they're about to cross a threshold. They are on the verge of saying something they've never said since the beginning of the war. They will give the Ukrainians Patriot anti-aircraft missile systems. This is probably the best in the world. It's a very big system. It's very fast. It goes at Mach 4, 4 times the speed of sound, more than that. It can engage targets a long way away, more than 20 miles away. It's ideal for shooting down ballistic missiles of the sort that the Russians look as if they're about to receive from the Iranians. In reality, of course, these could shoot more or less anything down, but it would be a waste if you used them on cheap drones. These almost certainly would be used against ballistic missiles if the Russians are going to deploy them. And the message from America clearly is, if you're going to get ballistic missiles from Iran, we will give the Ukrainians the things to shoot them down. And we'll get ahead of the game, although they won't appear on the battlefield for some time because they do take a lot of training. Nevertheless, this is America signalling to the Russians that we will cross another threshold if you cross one. And that seems to be what's happening now. Meanwhile, on the ground in Ukraine, the war goes on, and some interesting things are happening. The Russians are moving more troops, it seems, out of the Kherson region, and they're moving even the airborne troops, the VDV troops, who are their best troops, and they're moving them up to the battles in Bakhmut and Crimea, which is where the battle is really ferocious. The Russians look as if they've made some lodgement now into the residential areas just to the east of Bakhmut, and they've got round a little bit to the south of Bakhmut, although I don't think they'll encircle it very easily, but they are making gains there, and they really intend to try to take the town. The Ukrainians are fighting back ferociously. The 93rd Mechanized Brigade are giving a very good account of themselves, but we'll see what happens. Meanwhile, in Crimea, the Ukrainians look as if they are going to push the Russians out of Crimea, and whatever happens in Bakhmut, as we've said many times, won't matter if the Russians lose Crimea, because that is the main target. And one of the things happening that's very interesting, in the last few days, there have been a number of explosions around Melitopol, sabotage of the key M47 bridge over the M47 highway, that main highway that runs all the way to Kherson, and attacks on Wagner bases, Wagner troop bases around the area of Melitopol. The view of most analysts is that the Ukrainians are engaged here in shaping the battlefield. They're doing to Melitopol what they did in Kherson a couple of months ago, which is actually prepare the battlefield by cutting off Russian logistics now that Russian troops are getting thinner and thinner on the ground. And the speculation is that the Ukrainians might use their second and fourth armies. The armies, these are brigade size, they call them armies, but they've got a number of brigades who are in reserve. And they might use those forces to push down from Zaporizhia right down to Melitopol on the coast. In other words, to open up a third front in this series of offensives over the winter. Now, if they do that, they will be relying on the colder weather, the frozen ground, so that their armour, their tracked vehicles, can really make an impression. We don't know yet if they will do it, of course, but if they did, that would be another game changer in their attempt to win back as much territory as they've lost since the 24th of February. It's a possibility. I guess we'll find out when the weather turns colder and the ground really freezes.